Welcome to Profiling at the Movies. Today, I'm going to profile Eye for an Eye. Now, this is not an overly well-known film, not like the one I profiled last week, which was The Silence of the Lambs. And that is an iconic film that when people think about serial killers, they think about Hannibal Lecter. They think about Buffalo Bill. They think that's what serial killers are like. And although it's an exciting film, I gave it a very low rating because that is not what serial killers are like. What we'll have tonight, and when I discuss this film, is much closer to the real life serial killer, shall we say, because the serial killers are not usually brilliant. As a matter of fact, almost never, and they usually don't exhibit the strange, super strange behaviors of Hannibal Lecter and Buffalo Bill. They're usually just kind of losers. Like the guy, that's a security guard at the mall that you talk to and he seems nice enough, but he's a little bit of a, doesn't overly impress you. And so this may be a guy you actually know. Because he's a regular guy. And if you get to know him a little bit more, you'll notice he's kind of maybe he does creep you out because he's a psychopath. And some of the things he says and does, you you said you were what? You were in special ops? Sure you were, buddy. So they tell lies, make up stories, and do things that just make you uncomfortable, but they're usually not Hannibal Lecter. And so this film really exhibits what is more likely to be a serial killer, although I'll tell you some of the things I think are a little bit off. But I'm going to rate this film, and it is one of my favorites because at least it comes closer to what really happens in life and what people really go through when a serial killer strikes in their own lives and the devastation it brings. And we'll start with Sally Field playing Mrs. McCann. She's a married woman, and she and her husband have two children. She has a teenage daughter, and she has a young daughter. And while she's coming home from work, her teenage daughter is at home, and she is decorating the house. And she's making this phone call to her daughter because she's just saying, hey, what's going on? The birthday party we're getting ready for. And, oh, you're helping out. You're doing all these nice things. Isn't that great? And then the daughter says, oh, wait, there's somebody at the door. Probably bringing the stuff for the party. And the door opens. You hear the door open. And then you hear this scream. And she's been attacked just right there at the door. And this is what Mrs. McCann is hearing over the telephone. And the next thing you know, this is what's going on. The serial killer there's no slow approach here. It's not like he's trying to have a chit chat with her, trying to entice her into his car. He's not trying to bring her home to his house. Those kind of serial killers I call slow serial killers. In other words, they like to draw things out for a long time. This is what I call a fast serial killer. He just wants to get his big cheap thrill, and he wants to get it quickly. A funny thing about that in a very, very strange way is that the FBI have different designations for serial killers than I do. They have organized and disorganized, and then they have one they call mixed because if you can't figure out which one it is, you just call them mixed. Their organized killer is more of the type that I call a slow killer. In other words, he plans it. He maybe kidnaps some woman or girl. He abducts her, brings her home to his home. Maybe he puts her in a pit like Buffalo Bill did in Silence of the Lambs. And by the way, when I say she and I say girl, it doesn't mean I don't know that there are boys and young men and who also get kidnapped and are put through horrifying things as well. I just use that for the sake of that's easier at the moment, and I don't like to use the silly term they. So we're just going to use the word term she in this particular instance, and we're going to use he for serial killer because although there are female serial killers, they usually don't operate usually in an ultra-violent way, although it has happened. Aileen Wuornos is one of them. But generally speaking, that is not how they operate. There are serial killers that are female, so who operate in different ways. But in this particular instance, when we're talking about a sexual homicide, I go with fast and slow. And the FBI also puts them into groups like, oh, there's 4 different groups that they like to put them into, which have to do with motive, which is usually just a pack of lies, because serial killers usually, the only motive is power and control. So the rest of it's nonsense. It's just the way they like to get their power and control, and each one is kind of a little bit different, and just kind of what his fantasy is. So the slow guy, the slow serial killer, likes to bring the girl home to some place and keep her for a long time and torture her and be very sadistic and perhaps rape her 20 times until he's bored, and then he kills her. But the fast serial killer usually gets it over within 5 minutes. Because he wants the cheap thrill, the violent act. He wants the power that he feels when he just surges in there and takes over this human being and takes her out, rapes her and takes her out. He's playing God in that moment. He loves that. And what's rather amusing about it is that the fast serial killer will look at the slow guy and say, what's wrong with you? What a waste, 5 minutes. That's all you get out of it. What a loser. And the slow guy will look at the fast guy and say, you actually bring women back and torture them? That's sick. What a loser. So they each have a different way of thinking they're doing a cool thing. And but the fast type is actually the most normal type you're going to ever run into, the fast guy. So really, literally, most of them, I would say, I'm going to go with maybe 90% are more the fast type than the slow type. And they're the harder ones to catch in some ways, because since they do it so quickly and they just jump out of bushes, or they attack somebody on a path, or they just crash the door in, like this guy just knocks on the door and then attacks the woman. Often it's so quick and it's done with, there's not a lot of evidence, a lot to track when you're dealing with this. And it's very, very difficult to figure out who does these kind of crimes when they happen. And in this particular instance, and I'll explain that in a minute, it was a little too easy to figure out who did this one. It was a delivery guy. But first I want to just point this out. So the poor woman, she's hearing her child being killed, and she knows she's being killed. She's in traffic. She can't get home to save her. And I just always think this is just really one of the best scenes I've ever seen about the absolute horror a parent would go through knowing their child is being killed and there's nothing they can do to stop it. And knowing, and because she hears what's going on, she can hear the terror in her daughter's voice, and she can hear all the crashing and all the, she knows she's being brutally assaulted. And then all of a sudden it goes quiet because her daughter is dead. And she knows it's just, and she's stuck out there in traffic and she can't get home, and she's knocking on people's windows and screaming at them to call 911 so she can stay on the phone with her daughter. And a lot of the people are like, well, that woman's crazy because she's acting really weird. She's running all over through the streets. And that actually just feels so real to me, because, you don't act necessarily calm in these circumstances. Oh, well, my daughter's being killed. No, you're just losing your mind. And it's just, you can really feel it. And I thought that's what I love about this film, is that you really feel what family members go through. And you also feel what the victims go through, because that was such a realistic scene. And I have a lot of crimes that I've worked on where a girl has been killed very quickly. And I just think of the horror, that her life is over so fast, and how she must have felt. You're just jogging along. She's thinking, oh, I'm so glad I got this new job. Boom. And then you're on the ground and somebody's strangling you. And you just know in that flash moment, your life is over in the most agonizing, horrible way, in this most brutal attack, that the beautiful life you had just 5 minutes ago, you had your nice house, you had your little puppy dog, and you're going to go home at Thanksgiving to see your parents. And in that flash, in this brutal, horrifying way, it's just over. And so you see this in this movie when you see that girl being attacked as soon as she opens the door. And it is more realistic than most of the scenes I've ever seen in serial killer movies that I think tend to do it in such a glamorized way, or in such a, you're in the serial killer's mind doing it like, oh, this is cool. I always feel like there's something wrong with it. But this film feels right. It feels like exactly what it would feel like. And if you're not horrified, and they don't overly show gruesomeness. They're not showing blood, and they're not showing like a horror, like the normal serial killers do, which I like to show the horror film type things, which always disgust me because I'm like, that's sick. You're actually showing what the serial killer is getting a thrill out of. That just makes me kind of sick. In this film, you just sort of know what the girl is dealing with, and it's really well done. I just have to say, I think it's brilliant in the way it's accomplished. So anyway, the poor mom, Mrs. McCann, arrives home, and this is what she sees. The cars, all the police cars are there. She knows her daughter's dead. And I just think about that concept, that in that moment, as soon as you're arriving home, it's all over and your daughter's gone. And, you left that morning, everything was fine. And you get home, your daughter's gone and been brutally murdered by a serial killer. I mean, what could be worse? Just what could be worse than that? And some people have asked me as a profiler, they've asked me, what is the scariest thing you can think of that could ever happen in your life? And I say this exact thing, because I know what families go through. I think to myself, oh my God, what if I got the knock at the door and the police are standing outside and I know what's happened? I can't. That's horrifying. Or I get the phone call, sorry to tell you, this is Detective so-and-so. And oh my God, that's it. There's a very sad case recently, that actually my children know this particular young woman, and this just happened last week. And she went out to a bar to celebrate her birthday, and she's only 26. And she left the bar in Baltimore and was walking to her car, got separated from the rest of the girls, whoever she was with, and never made it to the car. They found her car. And the next day, she just didn't show up for she was supposed to have lunch, and she never showed up for lunch. And that's how they knew something was wrong, because her birthday, she didn't show up for lunch with her family. And her car was still there. But what happened was that the family called her phone, and guess who answered? The police. And can you imagine when you call your daughter's phone, the police answer, you just know it's something absolutely horrible. And they found her purse on the street, and they found her body in the water, and now it's a homicide investigation. So, this film really captures that how quickly that can happen and how horrifying it would be. And I just don't think enough serial killer movies focus on the families and the victims. And they're always focusing on, in a sense, how creepy it is. And the serial killer is doing all these horrible things. And then the profiler is chasing the serial killer. And then they get together, and, the profiler fights the serial killer, and the profiler wins, and the serial killer finally dies. And it's really an adventure horror film. You know what I mean? It has nothing, and the family is usually left out of it, because that's just not interesting to people most of the time. But I think that has to be one of the most important things, is what does a family go through? And this is kind of an educational film in that sense, because you really do feel what the mother goes through, what the victim went through, or what people go through when this happens. And I just think it still has Hollywood and stuff in it, let me tell you. But just the fact that they even approached that and did something with it. Somebody wrote that into the script. I have to give them credit for it, because you rarely see that. You really, really rarely see that. And so after this happens, the next horrible thing you end up doing is here's the parents having to sit there in the police station talking to the detective. Now, personally, I think the detective his role was written really dreadfully, absolutely dreadfully, and he just didn't act like he didn't conduct an investigation in any way that I thought seemed realistic. And I thought their interaction with him was kind of weird, because usually the family usually ask a million questions, and they pressure the police, because they want to know, have you caught the guy? Who's the guy? They're calling like every day, if not twice a day. They're there hounding the police, because they want the killer found that did this to their child. And a lot of times in serial killer investigations, the problem is they don't know who it is, because it's simply usually a stranger homicide, and they have absolutely no links between the victim and the killer. So then what do you do? So that's so problematic that most of the serial killer crimes go unsolved. Serial homicides are they're the last thing anybody wants to get as a police detective, because most crimes aren't like that. You do have a suspect, but serial homicides, most of the time you do not. And the problem is that they have who in the great world is the one who did this. And one of the problems I have with the way detectives handle this serial homicides is that they tend to keep everything, they don't put it out in public. They might say, does anybody know anything about this homicide? But they don't tell you anything about the homicide. So everybody goes, well, I don't know anything. But if they actually gave more information at the exact time, how it happened, exactly what weapon was used, and describe a psychopath and ask, do you know a psychopath who, is in your life or lives next door or you work with, who has acted in a strange way, who knows that area, who was maybe in that area? Did he come home and give you some clothes to wash or a weapon to hide? Was he digging holes in the backyard? Something, go to the public. But a lot of times they don't. So they just keep looking for some physical evidence that'll mean something like fingerprints or DNA. And if they don't get that, it just, gets shelved essentially. And the family keeps calling and saying, what's going on? What's going on? And they keep telling them, we're working on it. And then the months pass and the years pass and other people die. But, sometimes they catch them 20 years later and say, oh, look, they killed 10 people. And then it's like, but they had 20 years to kill 10 people because nobody caught them. So, but dealing with the police, I feel sad for both sides because, of course, the parents are going to just hound the police to death because they want to know what's going on. And sometimes the police, even if they're doing the right things, haven't got an answer. And then you're being hounded by the parents and you've got nothing to tell them. So it's a crummy situation, absolutely crummy situation all the way around. So one of the things that happens, so in this particular case, which is unrealistic, the delivery guy, because there's DNA, he left DNA at the scene and he was a delivery guy. They actually do catch him. And his name is Robert Dube, and that's Kiefer Sutherland, and he is creepy. And so he plays a pretty creepy dude. Now, I think he's a little too creepy in the sense that he's creepy like 100% of the time, when most serial killers are just boring people who you probably wouldn't think are particularly scary in any way. He's kind of scary, but you would normally not think they're scary. That's the problem, is that, if they say, hey, can I walk you to your car? You go, well, it seems like a nice, normal guy. And then you get to the car and he hits you over the head. So Robert Dube is a little too creepy a lot of the time. But he is presented as a loser, which I like, because a good portion of these guys, who are the fast guys especially, are losers. And they have trouble with jobs and females. And, there's just, they're weird. And they say things, they lie a lot. They make up stupid stories. And after you're with them a while, you go, that guy's kind of creepy, and then maybe I don't want to date him. I kind of don't want him around. I don't want him to work here anymore. So there's a creepiness about them, which he shows, but I don't think it's usually as exaggerated as it is in this particular instance. But I love the fact they show he's just a loser. And as a matter of fact, here's his apartment, which I think is quite interesting. This is where he lives, and it's just a loser apartment. There's nothing fancy on the walls. There's not pictures of creepy things on the walls. There's not writing on the walls. He's not psychotic. He doesn't have, like, if you Silence of the Lambs, if you look at Buffalo Bill, his whole house is creepy, creepy, creepy. This guy just has a sloppy room in a cheap hotel. And the other thing that you can find in there is pornography, but he's got softcore porn. And everybody thinks the serial killers would all have hardcore porn, but those are the slow guys, because those are the guys who want to keep the woman for a long time and torture her. So they like hardcore porn. But a lot of the fast serial killers actually have some weird romanticized thing about the world, and they know, oh yeah, I want a nice girlfriend, and they don't want to think of themselves as disgusting to torture women. I mean, except for 5 minutes. But so they often use softcore porn as their kind of like their fantasy girl, and they kind of wouldn't mind killing that fantasy girl, but they don't really go as much into sadistic stuff as one would think they would. So I think that's kind of interesting and is often kind of overlooked. That's actually how they behave. There's another little part here. They are showing his sadism here, that he's sitting around this dog annoys him, and then he pours hot coffee on its head. And it's very interesting because I knew a guy once, and I knew he was a psychopath, and he had a record. And actually he was, he came to my house to do some work. And because I hired him to do gutter work on my house because he was cheap. And then he gets in my house and he says to me, he says, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And I said, "I'm a criminal profiler." And he said, "Oh, really? Cool, man." And I just got out of prison. I said, "Well, for after what, I think he was there for 10 years." And so I'm like, "Great." And I've got a murderer sitting here, but he was cheap. So one of the things he had was a cat, and when he would hold the cat and like adore the cat, so you think, see, there's a nice guy, he likes a cat. But I'll guarantee you, if the cat annoyed him one day, I wouldn't put it past him, he'd kill it that day, because he said, "Well, the cat got on my nerves. I tossed the cat out the car window because it annoyed me." So just because they show affection in one moment doesn't mean they're not going to kill in the next moment, because they really don't have empathy for other people or other creatures. They just those things amuse them. So, but I thought this was good because the dog comes up to Doob and he just pours coffee on his head because he's a creep. So anyway, Doob, they go to court, and because they actually have evidence against him, and then there's some screw up with the DNA, and then the method that the defense didn't get what they needed, and they dropped the case against him. They dropped the charges, and that's not usually realistic, as far as they don't usually catch him that quick, and that happens. But the problem is that that guy's out there, whether he's been caught and released or whether he's just out there and you don't know even what he looks like. You're a parent who's struggling to get closure on that case. And so Mrs. McCann goes to this family of victims meeting, and it's very, very sad to watch these people try to struggle through and have somebody who understands them, because when your child is killed, people don't like to be around you. I mean, you're very uncomfortable to be around. And probably one reason is because you're not that fun to be around anymore either, and they don't know how to deal with your emotions, so you end up isolated, and this is the one place somebody will understand you. So she goes there, which I think is kind of cool, that they show this, and therefore you can understand a little about what kind of group you don't want to belong to ever in your lifetime, and that would be a parent of a murdered child. And so then there's something else that happens in this film, and Robert Doob, because it's Hollywood, so Mrs. McCann has been like stalking him, trying to find out who he's going to kill next. And so anyway, he sneaks into the school playground and into this little playhouse, and this is her daughter, and now he's pretending to eat a Play-Doh cookie with her. And then after that happens, and she realizes he was in that place with his daughter, he comes up to her and whispers in her ear something unpleasant, and she pretty much is freaked out, as she should be. But of course, in reality, serial killers do not chase people around. They don't usually go after the victim's family. There's extraordinarily rare cases where anybody ever came back out of prison, for example, and went after somebody that attacked. Has happened, but very rarely. Most of the time what happens is, once the serial killer has killed the person, he's done. He's gotten his thrill, and he goes back to normal life. He goes, okay, my girlfriend dumped me last week. That's what pissed me off. And so I'm going to go see if I have an opportunity that comes up. So I'm out walking on a walking path, or I'm tooling around a neighborhood, and there's this one lone girl, and I just jump out and grab her. I rape her. I kill her. It was great. And now I'm going to go home and eat a hamburger. And tomorrow I'm going to get up and look for another job, because I lost that too. And maybe I'll get a new girlfriend. He's done. He's had his thrill, his cheap, crappy thrill, his moment of power and control, which is the only thing he cares about. And he doesn't care about the family. He doesn't look back. I mean, it's extremely rare when you see the few things where people say, he wrote, you got somebody who contacts the police, writes weird notes, or those kind of things. They're so rare. The majority of them just go about their business, which is why they get away with it, because the next day they look perfectly normal, or maybe even the next hour they look perfectly normal. There have been serial killers who kill somebody and then literally just pick up some food and go home to their wife. And they walk in the door and go, "Hey, pizza, hon." And so when the police talk to them, in the neighborhood, who might have done it, the wife isn't even suspicious of her husband, because he came home with pizza. Girl was killed at 9:30. At 10 o'clock, he shows up with pizza. Why would I suspect him? He's perfectly normal. There was one case I do remember where the guy killed the girl early in the morning and he went straight to work after that. And everybody in the place of work said, she just came to work and seemed perfectly normal. So, he had no clue. And this is true for this kind of, especially this kind of fast guy. He's just done with whatever he's doing. He doesn't have to go home to the girl again and again and again because he's got her in the basement. He doesn't have to keep working at it. He's just done. And so in reality, that's it. He's finished with that crime. He's going about his life. And when he feels bad again, when something else happens and he feels like crap in his life, then he wants to get his thrill again, and then he attacks again. But so that he would ever have chased, that Robert Dube would ever have chased Mrs. McCann is totally unlikely. But anyway, she's freaked out, and so she goes and takes a self-defense class, which I think is really ridiculous. I've been against this for a long time. Sometimes when a girl's killed, like on a campus, somewhere in a college, then what happens is there's suddenly all these classes and all these girls are taking it to get empowered, and to protect themselves. And they take a 3-hour class or maybe a 3 evening class if you get the biggies. And somehow in that small period of time, you're supposed to know how to protect yourself against a huge homicidal maniac, which I'm guaranteeing you when the homicidal maniac jumps out, you're going to lose your mind right there and freak out, and you're probably paralyzed with fear, and you're lucky to do anything. But these classes will teach you really useless stuff, because first thing they're going to teach you is how to punch, and you girls are going like this, the girly punch, with your wrist is like this, and you just break your hand. It's not like they're going to boxing classes, which I've taken, and martial arts classes, so they actually learn how to do proper punches. And they practice on a heavy bag over and over, and they hit, against something. People put up mitts and you hit them, and you learn to do these different things. No, you're just in a class going, really? That's what you're teaching women? Okay. And then they teach them how to kick, and they do a really bad kick. And most girls, unless they're out walking or running, don't have even tennis shoes on. They got 4-inch heels. And let me tell you, kicking in 4-inch heels is really not a successful thing usually. And then we have we had the weight class problem, what I call it. Most girls are what you would call a flyweight if you were in boxing. And the guy who jumps out is usually Mike Tyson, or at least a middleweight. He's a strong man, and he's an enraged, crazy psychopath. And he jumps out, and you go like this at him, and he beats the living crap out of you. And he probably only has to throw one punch, and you're down. You're just completely down. And secondly, a lot of times they don't hit you straight up, or you don't see it coming. They hit you over the back of the head. They hit you from the side. They slam you with something. They run, all of a sudden throw something around your neck. I mean, you don't have time to fight. It's over. Just like in this movie, they open the door, it's over. You cannot win. So these self-defense things, these really quick self-defense things, just teach you a lot of phony, very, very phony feeling empowered. It's teaching you to feel empowered, but in reality, it's setting you up for a fall, and a very bad one. Yes, I'm all for women doing boxing and martial arts, because you're doing that on a consistent basis. You're strengthening your body. You're learning real techniques. But you should also, while you're learning those techniques, know not to put yourself in situations where you're going to actually have to use those techniques, because you learn quickly what your likelihood is. And you might be able to use those techniques in certain situations if you're really good at it. That'll give you some time to escape or time to get help. But quite frankly, you're probably better off with, my opinion is, one of those very shrieky, loud siren things. Because when you hit that button and throw it in the bushes, first of all, it hurts your ears, and the guy has to concentrate, and then he thinks, oh God, it's going to get somebody's attention. I'd go with a shrieky siren that you can throw if you have even the opportunity to do that. So don't go jogging at dusk and dawn by yourself, ladies. Don't go down dark alleys. Don't go through dark parking lots by yourself. Don't go out drunk and stagger around, because it happens so quickly. And so you might have a chance, and it's nothing wrong with giving yourself that little chance, but let's face it, not a bright idea to say, well, you have 1 in 10 chance of winning on that. It's not a good idea. Well, and so then Mrs. McCann does this. She goes and takes a firearms class, a little bit smarter, in my opinion, because if you do see it coming, you could pull out a gun. If you have a carry permit and you see somebody coming, all of a sudden pulling out a knife in a parking lot, that might help you out. If you're at home and your doors are locked and your bedroom door is locked, and you hear someone breaking into the house, and you can call the police and then train your gun on your bedroom door, and somebody breaks through your bedroom door, you got a chance to shoot them as they're coming in. But again, if you're going to own a firearm, you better take all the firearm training classes so that you're actually skilled with it. And then of course you're responsible for keeping that gun either on your body or in a safe. So your teenage crazy, your psychopathic teenage child doesn't get it and go shoot up his school, which actually does happen and it really pisses me off, because if you get a gun, you better be responsible for it. And I am pro being able to be able to protect yourself, but you also have to be responsible at the same time. So anyway, she does that, and then she sees this next, which is Doob, because she's been spying on. He is now knocking at another door, delivering more stuff, and I don't know how a delivery service found him. I guess I didn't. Let's talk about background checks while I'm at it. So you wonder, why would they hire this guy, right? Wasn't he a delivery guy before when he attacked a girl and killed her? Well, the problem is he was charged with it, and then the charges were dropped. So he's not guilty of anything. That does not give him a criminal record. And besides which, you want to know how many people actually check criminal records? Well, very few. Unless you're in a state where, and I happen to be in Maryland, thank God, that one thing I can do is go online and I can put somebody's name in and I can get their criminal record. And it's free, and it's just like that. I can check out anybody in a second. But there's other states where you can't do that. And the only way you can get their criminal record literally is to go to every courthouse in the state that they might have lived in, the area they might have lived in, and check the records. Now, who can do all that? And what if they didn't come from another state and you can't even get there and they don't have online stuff? So you have no way to get the information. Oh, you say, well, they should hire somebody. You know how much it costs to hire a private investigator to do a whole background check on somebody? And you're hiring a dude to drop some groceries off. You're not going to do all that. So some guy applies for it. You go, where'd you work last? He gives you something phony. Maybe even gives you a friend to call, and you hire him because you don't have anybody. So you hire him. So anyway, Doob has got this job, and so now he's out there in public, free. And then he knocks on the door, and another woman answers, and boom, he kills her. And another brutal scene, very quick again. And in this particular instance, the story is on this one is that the police, because he again delivers and they know who he delivered, so he went to that house and the girl ended up dead. But they had his fingerprints in the house, but he was delivering groceries, and he'd been in the house many times delivering groceries, and there was proof of that. So he would have touched things in the house, brought groceries to the kitchen and touched the kitchen counters, whatever, touched the door. So his fingerprints are there. So supposedly that wasn't enough to go to court. And then he used a condom in the commission of this crime, so he wasn't stupid enough to leave DNA twice. So again, gets off, and he's out there in the world. And there's a one statement that he makes in the movie Doob, which I really, really liked. He said to Mrs. McCann that it wasn't personal to him killing her daughter. She didn't mean anything to him. And Mrs. McCann responds back, well, it was personal to me. And I love that statement because it really shows what's going on in these two people's minds. For the mother, that crime destroyed her life, destroyed her daughter's life, destroyed everything. She manages to go on afterwards, like most people have to, because she's got a daughter and you have to go on in life. But this 5 minutes wiped out her life. And this piece of crap over here says, that 5 minutes has made me feel good. And quite frankly, I'm over it. And I don't even give a crap about your daughter. And that's exactly the way a psychopath thinks. He doesn't have feelings for what he did. He doesn't feel guilt or remorse, and he's over it. He's over it. He's moving on. So too bad, lady. So I want to rate this film. I thought Sally Field was excellent, and I love the way she represented the absolute heartbreak and all the torment she was going through. I thought it was brilliant. So I'm going to give her, I guess I have to give her 9 or 10. I'm going to give her a 9 on that, maybe 10, because some of the stuff was kind of a little ridiculous later on in the movie, and probably she wouldn't act that way. But I just love the emotions that she showed, so that everybody watching this movie can actually feel like what the family of a victim goes through. Now, as far as this piece of crap over here, Doob, Kiefer Sutherland sure made him creepy, and you know, once you see him in this movie, you just say you wouldn't want to date him. And he is creepy. I like the way he was very, very super creepy. I think it was too super creepy. Maybe he was told to do super creepy a little bit too much, but the way he committed the crimes was really well done, and just his general creepiness. I'm going to give him an 8 because I just don't normally see the loser creepy as a serial killer in a movie. And so I think that's really good. I'd like to give the movie a 9 altogether for the fact that whoever wrote this actually cared about victims and actually showed things from a victim's perspective. And they actually showed a non-brilliant serial killer. So you didn't think he was cool. There's no way you thought he was cool. You know, it's not like, oh, Hannibal Lecter's so fascinating. This guy's not fascinating. He's just a creep. He's just an annoying, scuzzy creep. And that's cool that they presented him that way. So whoever wrote this, and by the way, I did read a book that I think this was based on, just dreadful and had nothing to do with this film. So do not buy the book that this was supposedly about. It's not the same thing. But whoever wrote this, the screenplay did a fabulous job as far as really putting forth the feelings of the victim and the way a loser serial killer like this actually behaves. So I really appreciate that. And that's my analysis of this film. It's not a well-known film. Not very many people have seen it because a lot of people say it's not, a brilliant film like, Silence of the Lambs as far as the videography goes, or they didn't spend a fortune on it. Let's put it that way. Some people said it's like a TV show of the week. But I really like the content of it. And I think it's really, if you're interested in crime and the victims of crime, this is a great movie to see, and also to see what a more normal serial killer would behave like, as opposed to all these brilliant ones in these other films. So I really recommend you see it. You can see it on Amazon. No, I'm sorry. Yes, Amazon. You can rent it through them, and I think you can also rent it through YouTube. Yeah, you can rent it through them too. So and you could of course buy a copy, but those are the two places I believe you can rent it, and so I really recommend you do that. And but I want to show you the book I wrote called How to Save Your Daughter's Life. You can go to Amazon for that, or there might be some used copies around you can get through eBay, because I believe that's actually out of print, but you can get the audio version with some lady who actually, I didn't get to do the audio version, and I didn't particularly like the lady who did my audio version, and I don't know why they didn't ask me, because I've done audio before, so what? Why didn't I do my own book? But anyway, that's what happened, and so... but you can check on Amazon to see what they do have there, and then you can maybe go through eBay. And I love my book, I really do, and I've recommended this to so many people because I write so many details in there on if you're raising a daughter, of all the ways your daughter can get in trouble and become a victim, whether it be through serial killers, or whether it be through bad boyfriends, or men you bring into your house, or drugs, or prostitution, running away, all kinds of things like that, the online stuff that's going on. So I really, really recommend that book. And the other book I recommend you read is Killing for Sport. This is a book I wrote, getting rid of the myths of serial killers. And I go through a lot of the beliefs of serial killers, and I knock an awful lot of them down because they're simply not true. And so this book kind of just lays it right out there and says, this is the way it really is. And it's actually kind of a fun read. So it's not painful. And so I really recommend you read that. And you can also check out all my other books at Amazon. And by the way, I want you to remember not to forget to like and subscribe, because I'd like your support for this channel so I can keep doing these videos. And so thank you for being here. And I'm going to be back next week with another movie, but I got to figure out which one I want to do. I'll pick a good one that people think represents serial killers or crime in some way, and I will then go through it and let you know what I really think of it. Thank you for being here. Bye, and see you next time.